There's not a lot of brands building for the everyday golfer, but there's this massive growth and vibrancy happening in everyday golf and everyday golf life and all these amateur leagues. So we said, why don't we partner up with these places and build for them and show up with all this value for them, events, balls, gear, stuff that is much more economical for them, and actually a brand that gives a shit about them and cares about them.
Welcome to the DTC Insider podcast, where online business owners come to find actionable tips and tactics to grow their businesses. Now, here's your host, Brian Roisentul.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the DTC Insider podcast. I'm Brian Roisentul, your host, and today I'm joined by Jordan Lunetta, the founder of Odin Golf. Hey, Jordan, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, Brian, great to see you. I know we were just talking earlier about your trip to Berlin, which was pretty epic.
Yeah, and just to give the audience context on that, you live there.
I live in Berlin. I grew up in Northern California near San Francisco, where I'm actually dialing in now. We were in town for a big golf event that we do yearly, but we run the business from Berlin. And as we were joking, Berlin is like one big Depeche Mode album, very grungy but sexy, a lot of interesting parts of the city, east-west vestiges of the past, and just an incredibly eclectic place to live in and just amazing spot. So I'm really glad you got to go visit, and I'm sure we could jam for hours on the city. Yeah, I'm really glad you got to go.
Yeah, so I had a great time with my wife back then. And, before talking about your background, why don't you start by telling the audience more about Odin Golf? What does the company do?
Odin Golf is, we believe, the de facto golf brand for the everyday golfer. So we have an incredibly vibrant community called the Odin Social Club, where we do events and we collaborate with a lot of other leagues and brands and creators. And then we have our centerpiece products, which are golf balls and apparel. And we, the four of us who started Odin, have software backgrounds. We built and scaled software companies. So we almost view it as a platform for the everyday golfer where they can have a table spread of value that they get, whether it's the community events or the products, collaborating with other people and meeting new people in the community. So that's how we view Odin and how we really were intentional about building it from the beginning.
Okay. And you said that you have a background, building tech companies, right? And scaling tech companies. So could you please talk about that a little bit? What kind of companies did you found and did you start and scale?
Yes, so the four of us worked in Berlin and other parts in Europe in the consumer tech scene. So Berlin for many years, and I think it's changing a lot now, but it was viewed as the quintessential consumer tech hub of Europe. So what happened was you had a lot of repurposed e-commerce models from the US and other places like Airbnb for Europe or food delivery for Europe, which is a company that some of us worked in. So that was quite interesting. And that was through the Uber area growth at all costs, which was really fascinating. The few of us, we helped build up Delivery Hero, which is still around. It's still one of the largest food delivery companies in the world. And it was basically building for Europe, Asia, Latin America. We had a company actually, Pedidos Ya, and in Latin America, you may be familiar with it. So we were everywhere basically except the US. And this was, it was a fascinating time. And this was basically like the era of raise as much money as possible and just basically take the war chest and go around and acquire and build the business. It's since changed, as you know, much differently now in today's day and age. So we built that up. Myself, I started a developer tools SaaS company in Berlin and built that up for a couple of years. And then the four of us have been golf nuts since growing up. And that was the impetus for starting Odin, for taking what we've learned in the software world and then bringing it to what we would view it as a hardware good, golf balls and apparel, and which was much different building than a software company.
Being from the US and moving to Berlin when you were 20 years old or so?
Yes.
What are the main discrepancies, the main differences, good or bad, doesn't matter, but the main things that you find different between the two cultures?
I was really specific and intentional about wanting to live and work in Europe. And during my bachelor's, I had done a semester abroad in Rome, and I was playing water polo with the team in Rome and also studying there. And I was eating cacio e pepe all day, carbonara, drinking Negronis, and I was like, okay, Europe, this is incredible. What a lifestyle. I want to do whatever it takes to get back here as soon as I finish school. And being from the Bay Area, tech was in the DNA just growing up around the farm of tech here. And I didn't want to work in London. I looked at some other tech hubs, but Berlin was very akin to what I had in San Francisco. Very eclectic, very international, very open. And I just saw that, hey, I wanted to work and I'm Italian by background. So food is a centerpiece of the family, maybe used as a political weapon in some regards. And I wanted to work in food tech. And really the only couple food tech companies were being built in Berlin, and Delivery Hero was one of those companies. And I basically talked my way into a job there 12 years ago, moved over there, and I like I said, I was already familiar with how Europe was, but Berlin was a notch up in a lot of ways because there are some international components to it, but it's quintessential Italy. It's a very chaotic Roman, very specific and nuanced Italian city. Berlin, you hear Portuguese, you hear Spanish, you hear Greek, you hear English, you have Aussies, you have Brits, you have a amalgamation of all these different cultures. And what's really cool about Berlin is everyone starts on the same foot when they move to the city because it's so international. You're looking to meet new people, you're looking to explore, have more adventures. So I always found that it was much easier to meet people in Berlin because everyone's on an even playing field. And as we were discussing earlier, the other amazing part of the city is you have art, you have music, you have the tech scene, you have blue collar workers, you have bankers. Everyone comes together in harmony in an incredible way without judgment. You don't have this, discrepancy of wealth or income or housing or that sort of thing. It all comes together in an incredible way, and that's part of what I like about Europe. And as we were talking about earlier, the work style is much different than the US. Europeans have a much better balance. They work incredibly hard, but there's a balance of like, hey, we're gonna work hard, but we're also gonna live with zest. And it's not to say that doesn't happen in the US, but the culture is much different. And the other thing too, which is incredible, is you're a couple hours away of this high concentration of all these different cultures, which is fascinating, especially when you're building a business over here, localizing a company or a brand in specific countries, whereas the US is you may have local state differences, but it's one big massive ocean you're building for.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but many Americans don't ever leave the US other than Mexico, let's say, right?
Yes. I have friends that still live here. They don't even have a passport. And I'm always trying to wrangle people together. Hey, you got to come visit. It's only 10 and a half hours over the pond. Get out and explore. And that was also part of why I wanted to move out to Europe and Berlin was California and the Bay Area. If I ever wanted to come back, it's always going to be there. It's always going to be a tech hub. It's always going to be a lot of vibrancy, an incredible place to live. But I felt like, early 20s, no family, no kids, no mortgage. I have the flexibility to do that. If you're not going to do it, you need to go explore. And I think also, like what you had done, doing those Europe trips and traveling and being international with your brand and your company, you have a much different lens on life and
Yeah.
just you're very intentional about working with different cultures, different people. I think it's also you have stronger business acumen because you're keeping more things in mind and you're much crisper on more things than having maybe a tunnel view of how things are looking on life. And I think just life in general, just get out and explore. You're going to be way more well-rounded and you're going to have a much more fruitful experience as a whole.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was in fact going to say something similar. I made my first trip to Europe when I was 18 years old, and it opened my mind. Like it was, I cannot even describe that with words. It was like as a kid, you worship your parents. You think they are this, or I think I did, the smartest people there are, and I love them and they are smart, but it's like you don't know better. That's what you know. If all you taste or you try is the coffee shop around the corner, you're going to think they have the best coffee in the world because you haven't tried any other. If you live within your own same reality, forever, you won't know better. You won't get new ideas, fresh perspectives, and yeah, going to Europe or any other place opens your mind like wide open. I have met my main clients in the agency in the US. I travel there, but not many clients travel down here. And one did, not because of me. It was a coincidence, two actually. But one, it was funny because they came down here for, a holiday, and then the pandemic hit, and they were trapped here, but they liked it. So they started living here. To this day, they live here
No
since the
kidding.
pandemic. And we discuss and we have fun about all the crazy stuff that happened here that we as locals don't realize, because it's always the outsider that tells you
Mhm.
how you are different, even if it's better or worse. But it was like the cable guy, that he came to connect the cable to install it, and he invited me to a soccer match with his friends. It was like, what? You're the cable guy, like, and he was like, he's like, you're super open, you're like that. And yeah, we were having some fun around that. But yeah, it opens your.
It definitely opens your mind, and if you see a couple football games or two out of it, that's incredible. And that may happen in the States, but I think people are more afraid of opening up because they're thinking, we're I'm one thing I get all the time, speaking of, that mentality of like, hey, being open, there's a couple of examples. So hitchhiking is a big no-no in the US for many reasons. Hitchhiking in Europe, I don't know how it is in Argentina, but hitchhiking in Europe is very common for people to get around. And when I talk to friends or people in the US that ask about it, they're dumbfounded. They can't fathom hitchhiking, which I understand because they have the US viewpoint of hitchhiking. It's incredibly dangerous. That's a no-fly zone. That's another example. And the other thing too is the safety element, which I know is different for every city. But for Berlin, for example, it's for the most part safe. Yeah, there's areas maybe you don't want to go. But when I first moved there, I was younger. I was clubbing out to, the city never sleeps. There's always stuff happening. And I would tell people, yeah, I feel comfortable walking down the street. Like it's much different than if you're going to walk at 3 a.m. in San Francisco, or I don't know how it is in Buenos Aires, or New York is very specific. So I think just, yeah, that mentality of like, hey, there's another way to live, and there's another mentality and viewpoint on life. And your clients and friends who moved down there, they said, oh, actually, shit, this is incredible. There's another way to live here. And I'm sure that drove a
Yeah.
lot of their decision making.
Yeah, Buenos Aires stays up late. The other day, I
Yes.
was celebrating the anniversary with my wife. We went
Mm,
and then we went to have some dinner, and I
mhm,
saw some table, available inside, and it was cold. It's winter. It's the opposite here, right? So
mhm.
currently it's in autumn, slash winter. And then I wanted a table inside, and they said, no, these are booked for the shift of the 10:30 p.m. So what
Yeah.
I'm trying to say is that we have dinner late. And I have
Yes.
little ones of almost 6-year-old twins,
Mhm.
so I have dinner at probably 8 p.m. But otherwise, in Argentina, we have dinner at 9, 10. I don't know if 11, but if you go out Saturday night, Friday night, whatever, probably 10 p.m. is common. And probably I had a super hard time finding a restaurant open at 9 p.m. in Europe, right?
Yeah, totally. Germans especially, they eat 6:30, 7. I know Spaniards, Italians, the Mediterranean cultures, they eat
Yeah.
later, akin to what you guys have. 9, 9:30, and it's fascinating, man. And so when you guys you start work later, right? Like 10:30, 11 in some cases. Mhm. Yeah.
So talking about Odin Golf, because I have a lot of fun talking about other things, but people listening to this is like, okay, when are you guys going to talk shop and talk business? So I have something interesting for all of you watching and listening, and no pressure, Jordan, of course, but there's something special about this episode, something special about your company that due to this whole cost context and ecosystem that these days happen in the US, many brands are looking to starting a business or starting operations in Europe. And that's where you operate, right? So what can you tell, being an American, but operating and living in Europe, what are the things that are probably um, that American brands should know about Europe and don't, let's say, underestimate when looking to opening operations there?
So we live and work in Berlin, but we build specifically for the US market, and we come back all the time for our golf events, seeing our customers and our community in person. We're hanging out on these digital watering holes, and part of why we built the community was, hey, golf is done in person. we got to get together live, and that's something that we do a couple times a year. But we just build in living in Berlin, which is fascinating because when we're building for Pacific Standard Time, which is 9 hours behind, we're in our skivvies at night, building the business at our homes, which is fun. So golf specifically is completely different in the US than it is in Europe. And even within Europe, it's much different in Spain and Portugal and Germany and Italy. And then obviously up across the pond in the UK and Ireland. So it's much different than if you're going to be building a direct-to-consumer deodorant company or cereal company or apparel company. I would say the biggest thing to keep in mind, first off, is all the nuances and the localization that you have to do in Europe with all the different European countries. So you need to think about the go-to-market. So, for example, if you're an apparel company, is brand positioning, is this marketing, is this a go-to-market that we're doing in the US, but is this going to work in Spain? Is this going to work in Belgium? Is this going to work in Netherlands? So the first thing you should look at, like for example with us, golf is massive in Spain and Portugal and the UK. It's really not a big market in the Netherlands or in Belgium. There's people golfing or in Greece or Italy. So that's the first thing you look at is like, hey, what's our go-to-market here? Where are our entry points? And who are our personas? Like, are these people that are going to vibe with our positioning? Do we need to adjust our positioning? Do we need to look at how we do marketing differently that has all sorts of implications with the digital marketing? Is there offline that you do? So I think that's the biggest thing is like, who are we building for? What's this market like? And what are our entry points? So for example, if Belgium's big for your product, maybe you have people in Belgium already buying your product or they want to buy your product, it's in the US. Well, maybe that's something you should start to squeeze on and noodle on. Hey, maybe this is our first entry point so that we can learn. But if you want to go to Poland, well, that's a completely different persona, different language, different currency. There's so many local nuances that you have to keep in mind. And then you have to also figure out the operations, the shipping, the fulfillment, the logistics. The good news is it's really gotten much better and it's up par with the US on that front. So, and I think the good news is, and that's part of what you guys do with your company is if you want to test stuff out in different markets, maybe you want to do Portugal, maybe you want to do UK, you can very guerrilla style test stuff very easily now. And I think that's really great. That's something that we've learned too. We've always been champagne taste on a beer budget. We didn't raise funding. We've always been bootstrapped. So we've always found scrappy ways to test markets, locales, regions. And I know the US is much different. It's a one big ocean. There are state differences and region differences, especially with golf. But those are the things I think once you crack that, the other stuff can be figured out for sure.
The languages, you mentioned languages because, of course, there are many
hmm
countries, many languages. Do
hmm
you think that many of them, or many of the biggest, let's say, the biggest players or the biggest countries in Europe, do they speak English or do they accept English from a brand that is trying to enter in the market, or do they need to come with a local player or with a local lingo, let's say?
I would say yes, they are hungry for really cool, innovative products because they're discovering this again on the digital watering holes, TikTok, Snap, Instagram,
Right.
YouTube. So they're on a similar playing field that someone in the States would be of like, this is really cool. I would wear that. Or I see stuff in movies or TV shows, or I see stuff online. I want to vibe with this. Like, these are my people. This is my brand. And as you know, it's not about just the product, but the brand. And am I going to vibe well with this brand? Do I associate with their positioning, their mission, what they stand for? That goes a long way, especially with the younger generation. So the language, I think, and this is something that we looked at very specifically. So our positioning is on the bolder side. It's a little bit edgier, especially for golf. So our positioning and our edginess would not work in a lot of places in Europe because it wouldn't translate directly. And so our tagline is go balls out always, which in the US is basically like a go big or go home type mentality. In the US, there's a lot of those kind of sayings. They also exist in Europe, but it's a lot of those puns or sayings, everyday life. So go balls out always. If we translated that in Germany or in Dutch, it wouldn't hit well like it would in the US. Because when people in the US first heard that, they're like, oh, that's cool. You're selling balls and the go bigger, go home edginess. And if you look at our box here, it's bold, it's paint splatter, it's edgy. that's not something that would work in the culture in a lot of ways in Europe. So if you're a more neutral, let's an example, a deodorant company, a D2C deodorant company that's more neutral. Maybe you talk about the product and the sustainability of it and the utility around that. Maybe the positioning is more neutral and not as edgy. Something like that, I think, could be localized very well. So you have to find a balance. And also, too, I think we could probably, if we really did the homework and really were wanting to build for Europe now, we could localize it and maybe something, Germans have a saying that is golf related, but it could also work in the subculture or slang. That also, but you have to really dig in and really focus on, this is a market we're looking at.
Yeah, and of course, what I'm going to ask you, of course, will depend on each vertical. But what would you say are the biggest? Which ones are the biggest markets in Europe typically?
Typically, so I mean, it's much different now, but the UK, for example, because English and it's more akin to North America. So that's kind of a first entry point. We saw that too, like in the software world. A lot of software companies will go to Ireland or they'll go to the UK first, and then they'll spread out to Germany, for example, then they'll go over to, for example, the Netherlands. So I would say, look at like the subculture, and again, look at your positioning and who you're really targeting. If you're going for a younger demographic, you can start with some big cities. For example, Berlin is great. That's like ground zero for new stuff that happens in other places in the US, that there's a lot of things popping up. I always felt like Berlin was like 5 to 10 years later than a lot of stuff in the US, but it's getting much faster now because we have this global village. They're looking at YouTube and TikTok and all these places, so it's much faster of a turnaround time. So I would say the initial starting point is big cities. That's probably not a bad bet to look at. Yeah, I again, if there's a certain slant of your product that, for example, Spaniards would really like. Maybe you're building a D2C olive oil company. Well, Mediterraneans love olive oil. That's the centerpiece of their cooking. Maybe you start there. Germans love olive oil and they use it, but they're not going to rock their socks off as much as Mediterranean culture. So those are the types of things you really have to look at.
Yeah, you got to do your research, of course.
Do the research, and it doesn't, again, cost a lot now. You could be sitting in Idaho and test this out online, different channels. And I know you guys do an incredible job with that and have clients that do that. And so I think testing it is very easily, and the tools are so good now. And the other thing too, and this is what we did, was um, partners, local partners. And that was the biggest unlock that we had in our business. Is these traditional golf brands, they're building for the pros. They're not building for the everyday golfer. The everyday golfer is just a cog in the marketing engine of all these companies. But we said 99% of the market is everyday golfers like us, the everyday people. There's not a lot of brands building for the everyday golfer, but there's this massive growth and vibrancy happening in everyday golf and everyday golf life and all these amateur leagues. So we said, why don't we partner up with these places and build for them and show up with all this value for them, events, balls, gear, stuff that is much more economical for them, and actually a brand that gives a shit about them and cares about them. And that's part of our tagline.
You're big on in-person events, right?
Yes, we do. We're big on in-person events, and that was what we started with at the beginning of the company and the inception, to say we have these products that we want to build, but we were very intentional about, hey, we want to build this community of, not only it's an entry point for the products, but it's a way for us to embed ourselves and position ourselves as a brand, because golf is an incredibly social proofed game. When you show up to a course, you're asking people, hey, what is that you're wearing? What are you playing? They see stuff online. They're looking for new things. And everyone's looking for an edge in golf, because golf people are very finicky and religious about the routine, what they wear, how they swing, all the mechanics. So they're looking for new cool stuff to get that edge. And we felt like because we're building for the everyday golfer, the different personas of everyday golfers, we have to meet where he or she's at the everyday golfer watering hole, which is in this case Muni courses, and where do they play and hang out. So that was something we were very intentional about. Now, I will say, because we've never had a marketing budget, how we built that was very brick by brick, low budget, guerrilla style. And that was something that really was, I would say funky for us at the start because when you build software companies, when you release something, you get that instant scale or you get a semblance of nice scale when you release software. But when you deal with a physical product and you deal with real life events and going into the community, embedding in the community, that's a very brick by brick grassroots thing. And yes, there's a marketing budget component, but it's very, very specific. And it was something that we had to change coming from, a software world where you raise some dough, you have some scale, you go out and acquire people quickly. And there isn't a component of that, as you know, with D2C companies, but that was something that has worked out incredibly well several years later.
Yeah, I think especially more if you're bootstrapped, you always gotta build brick by brick. I think it's easy. I
Hmm.
don't know any other way, right? But
Hmm.
there are two options there that I know of or I can think of right now. And you chose the right one for sure, based on what I think, right? The first one is to create a product, create a storefront, let's say the website, whatever, and wait for sales or do ads only or whatever, right? The second one is going beyond the storefront. And it's what we've been preaching for years on this pod, on the newsletter, everywhere on social. And I have interviewed many cool brands, many big brands, and they say the same thing. They have all the same elements in common. And one of the key elements is they go beyond the storefront. They get involved with their community because they care. They are truly building for them and they are creating an experience, right? Before recording this episode, I interviewed Black Rifle Coffee. It's a
Hmm.
publicly traded company, 400 million in annual revenue. They said the biggest lever is community.
Hmm.
They are founded by veterans and they support veterans and they are all about that, the American spirit. And it's the key element. And they say, we are an entertainment company that sells coffee. We think ourselves in that. And they have over 1.9 million followers on Instagram, over 1.4 subscribers on YouTube. So they are a content company. And the same pattern repeats across, I don't know, Born Primitive, same thing, veterans, apparel company, same thing, BattleBox. BattleBox is survivor gear. They have over 1 million subscribers on YouTube, millions of followers. So they have a TV show on Netflix, content, but most of it community
Hmm.
first. They do even a reality show. So that's why I say that different scale, but
Hmm.
you're track brick by brick, but interacting in real life with your community and building a community, which is what you are doing, goes a long way.
Yes, totally. And I think that's an incredible case and incredible company that what this could look like, what a North Star could look like if you start being very intentional about building a community and moving beyond just the product. And that was the big unlock that we had building consumer tech companies. It was candidly a bloodbath, especially in food delivery, where consumers are incredibly fickle. They have everything at beck and call on their device, laundry, food delivery, music. There's no shortage of choice of things to buy and associate with. So moving beyond the product and again coming with a table spread of this is a brand that basically speaks to you as an everyday golfer, and we're out in the community here, we're telling the story. This is a mission and a brand that we can associate with. It's actually building value for me beyond the product. The products are incredible. I mean, you need to have an incredible product, but we said we need to move beyond the utility of just the product of like, hey, they're getting value, they're meeting new people. They're actually, we partner with a lot of other brands too that come to the events, other leagues. So that, hey, this new golf club company or this new tea company or this new hat company, whatever it is. I'm also getting value beyond what Odin is providing me. I'm getting much more here, and I think it also helps with like the Black Rifle example of telling the story and the positioning, actually living and breathing that beyond an Instagram ad or a Facebook ad. And those are just one pieces of it, but you need to have the A to Z for your who you're actually building for. And that's what we're getting up in the morning and doing. We're building for whoever your persona is and your target market. So that's going to just get harder and harder. I know direct to consumer is incredibly hard in so many ways. You need to zig while others are zagging a little bit. And
Right.
again, you don't need to have a Netflix show from day one. Maybe you get there, but just maybe you do start with a local meetup. But again, if you, to use the deodorant example, maybe you build a component around beauty products and deodorant, and or you're doing an olive oil company and you bring people to a potluck and you use the olive oil. There's no
Right.
shortage of ideas. Just think about and the other thing too, we were scratching our own itch with this company, Golf Nuts, spending a ton of money with these brands that we didn't vibe well, that didn't speak to us, and we said, look, we want to build something for us as everyday golfers. So I think if you just start with like the brass tacks, like bigger picture in mind, get out of the ads and all the digital acquisition you're doing, or all these sort of things, like out of the day to day, like what's the so what here? Because you need to take inventory, because we're always just building in the trenches. We try and do this, like just take like an inventory check and just like, what's the so what here? What are we doing? And, you need to bob and weave here. And again, we never had cheddar to play with. It was just, we had to just be scrappy with it. So I think it's what you're talking to of there's no better time to start now, but don't feel like you need to boil the ocean and have a massive media presence. Just like get started with a couple people.
And what about the expenses of running an event? If you're bootstrapped, again, from my point of view, it's the right strategy to interact with these customers in real life and host events. But on the flip side, there is an expense to do that. So how do you deal with that?
We never viewed them as money-making endeavors because we don't do them weekly or monthly. We do them quarterly, and they're very special, and it's something for people to look forward to. So we basically viewed them as just like a break-even operation. So we sell tickets essentially. So there's golf, and then there's food, there's drinks if you want to have beers or cocktails. There's goodies. So there's balls. We do limited edition. There's a towel behind me. We did a limited edition towel for an event. So we build it into the ticket price. But again, we like to call it pampering people. They show up to the course, they get an experience that they don't get elsewhere. They get some good limited edition goodies, they get fed, they break, we have pops, we play music, all these stuff. And it's built into the ticket price so that it's really for us to engage with the community. It's, yes, maybe there's an acquisition component to it, and maybe some people are playing the Odin products, but we're not shoving the product down people's throats. It's like, hey, we're getting the band together here. We're hanging out online. Let's get together, play golf. If you want to play the Odin products, great. If not, you just come together as an experience, and that goes much further in a much longer way than like, hey, we're getting you together, but we're trying to sell you all this stuff. Like, that was never our operation. Now, I would say the caveat is if we were going to do them much more frequent, like weekly or monthly, we would have to build a more economical model and do it that makes sense, and there are ways to do that. But we were just like, hey, we're earlier in our journey, let's just get people together, and that is a starting point. But if you want to do them at scale, yeah, you don't want to lose money on them. We're building a business at the end
Right.
of the day. So, and there are ways to do that for sure, and we know other brands that we partner with that do that. They do it at scale, and they have a much better model there.
Right. And what do you do to acquire customers, to buy your products, not for the events, right?
So the online, for sure, I think Instagram, we started very early, and we started doing a lot of different golf content on the course. And what we do is basically we'd message people who are much larger than us, other brands, other creators, and say, look, we love what you're doing. This is our positioning. This is what we stand for. We don't have a lot of money, but why don't we get together and go play, film some content? You can try the product out. We'd send some product out to people, which we could talk about that works well and it doesn't work well. We've had a lot of scenarios where sending product out to creators didn't work well. But it was basically like just talking to them like everyday golfers, because we're all in the same boat. We didn't start high at the professionals. We just start with people who are like us and building very similarly, have a very similar viewpoint on the game and on life and on everyday golf experiences. So we started there, and that was incredible for us. Again, very slow, but very concrete, very meticulous and very, very good. And that was how the word spread, like, hey, I saw this on this page, or I love what you guys are doing. How can I try the product out? And, we'd point them to the site. We were doing Amazon for a while. The other thing too that we did, because we were very intentional about meeting the everyday golfer where they're at their playing, and golf being a very social proof game, we sold into golf courses, so golf pro shops. So we felt like when everyday golfers show up to a pro shop and they see our brand, they instantly say, oh, this must be a good brand because it's here, because it's right next to all these other brands who have been in the game
Right.
for almost 100 years. So now I will say that's also very difficult because you have to give up margins. Retail is very hard, as you know, and golf courses are also running businesses, and they have different ways of how they buy products. And the other thing, which was really hard, was all of these big brands were entrenched with courses. They had accounts that they would just reload on product. So we really had to convince golf courses of like, hey, this is our brand. This is what we stand for. Here are our products, our balls that have been vetted by all the top notoriety golf governing bodies, all these big golf reviewers. So we had to do that too. We were very intentional about that, of like, these are great products. People love them. All these big review sites and all these big reviewers like them. And then they started to talk with us. But before that, we didn't have a chance in hell of partnering and selling to them.
Makes sense. And what do you do to retain customers? I think you do subscriptions, right?
So the other thing too we did was, which was a really fascinating journey, was when the whole Web3 NFT thing was hot and big, we did special Odin NFTs, and we did these really cool Odin characters. They're still on OpenSea, you can look them up. So we basically, the original vision we had was, we want to give an experience in a company and a brand to everyday golfers, the same thing that professional players get from traditional brands, and the professional players get paid by these old incumbent brands. So we said, like, we want everyday golfers to get paid to play golf. That was actually something that we wanted to do from the beginning. We didn't know what that looked like, but we were like, we'd love to give the same thing to the professionals to you as the everyday golfer. Well, when the Web3 NFT thing came out, we said, actually, maybe this is a cool, innovative way to have money and value flowing back to the community. So we did the NFTs. We built a lot of utility around that. And what we did was basically say, how do we want to have money flowing to courses, to players, and to other places in the community? So we did that as the first entry point, learned a lot, and felt like that actually maybe wasn't the best delivery of it, but people really liked the experience. Phase 2 of that was we launched our Get Paid to Play Golf campaign. And what we did was, actually, when people bought a dozen golf balls with us, we gave them 20% cash back to you as a purchaser. So we were actually Venmoing and PayPaling people money back, like $7, for example, our X1 ball here, $7 back to their Venmo or PayPal, so that they could spend on golf stuff, they could spend it at courses, they could buy food at the course, they could spend it on lessons. And basically said, like, look, if you're going to associate with us as a brand, we want to pay you. We want to give money back to you as an everyday golfer. You can go to 100 different brands, but if you associate with us as a brand, we're actually going to pay you. And this was one part of that vision that we had of Get Paid to Play Golf. That worked incredibly well. People loved it. But what we realized in talking with the customers, they said, we love having the money to spend on beers and food and stuff at the course and on golf stuff, because golf is incredibly expensive. But we need balls. Everyday golfers lose a lot of balls. We call them donating balls on the course, which is great for us because it's great marketing material. And we said, okay, if we want to have you reload without the price guilt, the customer said, we'd actually want to have that money on balls. Like, we need them anyway. Like, give us the money back for Odin products. Maybe you want to buy a shirt or a hat, to have something new. So we turned that into Odin cashback, which is basically getting cash back, but you spend on Odin store credit. And people really love that because, again, they need balls, they need gear, they love refreshing. I'm going to spend anyway, so I want to have that money back. So people really, really love that. So that's the 3.0 of the Get Paid to Play Golf. That's what the current manifestation is. And then we also have a subscription. If people want to set it and forget it, reload, I need a couple dozen every month, I don't have to worry about it. It just shows up. People also really like that. So that's separate from the cashback Get Paid to Play Golf thing. That's just, again, thinking about what's the platform utility that people are getting out of this. They get value out of the events. They love subscription. Not everyone loves a subscription, but if it's there, it's very
Sure.
easy. So that's how we thought about it. And again, it's like reading the room, taking inventory. Like, is this working? Or talking, like getting out of the building and talking with people, and the events help with that because we get to talk with people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
right.
first back, like I think there's no replacement to that because when you
Hmm.
interact with people in real life, even if they don't say anything to you, wow, let's say they are in your store, even if it's a pop-up store or reviewing your products in the golf course,
Hmm.
they are, even if they don't say a word, their face, their expressions give you signals. Sometimes they might be talking to a friend and say, oh, I don't know, we have had, companies here that sell, I don't know, bags. And it was like, oh, the pocket is too small, too big, or does it have a pocket for, whatever, the laptop or whatever, so you can get those interactions that, sure, some could come in a form of an Instagram comment or inbox or whatever. But many of those interactions, or some of the, not the first question, but the second interaction, like they ask something and it's like, would you need that? And it's like the explanation behind that. And I think what you did is, I was saying that it's a great story because actually what you said in a way happens everywhere. Like many brands have a good intention of offering their customers a benefit, but sometimes it's the wrong one. Not the wrong one, but you get it. It's like, it's not the one they were expecting. It was like, this is so cool, but it would be better. We would rather get this instead. And listening to those things is pretty important because this happens with discounts, with subscriptions. We help brands, grow their subscription base as well. And the number one mistake across the board is not understanding their customers. So why they churn. You're going to churn. Here's a discount. I'm not churning because of the discount. I have enough coffee. I don't know. I have enough.
Hmm.
I don't want that. Or I'm tired of drinking the same thing. So maybe I needed another option. Maybe I needed you to provide me with samples or the option to pause or whatever, So sometimes the solution or the incentive is not what you think it is as a brand.
Yes. And to be clear, we never got it right out of the gate. We had 99% of building a business isn't glamorous. So all these things we really had to get hit in the face and learn about, but
Mm.
without getting hit in the face and getting some arrows on our backs, we wouldn't have been able to manifest in the 1.0, the 2.0, the 3.0. I think there's so many different ways to just get a dialogue going. You don't need a massive pool of people. Choose 5 customers, choose 10, and it doesn't need to be a live event. It can just be like, "Hey, you reaching out as the founder," which you wouldn't believe goes incredibly long way, that people love hearing from the people behind the brand, and that's part of, what you do incredible with the pod, right? Is
I
hearing from them, and I'll like email people just, "Hey, tell me about the experience, anything we can improve. By the way, I'd love to hit the sticks with you and play. There's a commonality, there's golf, everyone loves golfing with meeting new people, so that's worked really well. So whatever your respective industry and business is, if it's a bag, maybe it's, hey, I want to send you a prototype bag that we're testing, beat it up, maybe travel with it. Let me know what you think. We'll get you in the ground floor. Whatever the example is, it can be done."
Yeah, I think on the fly, and maybe without even noticing, you're throwing some golden nuggets that I wanted to highlight for the audience because, I come from the computer science background.
Mhm.
My first company was a software factory I built as well
Mhm.
before going into marketing. And what you said about version one, two, three, that comes from that background, doesn't it?
Mhm.
It comes from building software
Mhm.
because
Yes.
that's how we think, because that's the way of doing things there. It's like you release one version, then the other one, and then the other one. But the founder mindset is, oh, I failed,
Mhm.
right? I
Yes.
tried. This didn't work. I'm a failure and whatever, And even though we don't get, like, we can get that too. We think of this trial and error as the next iteration. And he said
Mhm.
that clearly, right? And that's a strong mindset that most people should adopt because that will help them embrace the what doesn't work.
Mhm.
It's not failure. And even if you call it failure, if that's a word you like,
Mhm.
it's good. We
Mhm.
learn mistakes. We learn from failure. We learn from what doesn't work, and we become a better version of ourselves, the product we're building, whatever. Right?
Hmm.
So I think that's a good mindset to treat things. And I always say the same thing to my team. Like, this is for the SOPs. I don't know, the processes internally that we have.
Hmm.
Like, this is version one. Do you find that something doesn't work? Let's create version two. But it's not that the process was bad or something like that. It's the next iteration. It's natural.
Totally. And if you're building for a specific community or customer base, the ground floor testing, not everyone's going to want to be a beta tester or an alpha tester or just want to be involved. But that's also how to turn it around, how you can create a rabid enthusiast. Again, start with 5 or 10, and then you can really get the candid feedback and say, look, we're going to get some arrows on our back. That's okay. You need to just reach out to people and get a dialogue going, keep the line open. And I know it's easy to do, hey, call this number, this email. Most people won't reach out, and if they don't have a good experience, they'll just leave. And that's
Yeah.
just the consumer game. They're not going to tell you this isn't a B2B, Fortune 500 client, you're building, a software company for. They're just going to leave and go to the next brand or the next in line. So being very intentional about it doesn't cost anything to send an email. I'll even do it I won't even do like an email blast. I'll just, so and so, they just ordered a couple weeks ago. I'd love to tell me about the ball experience, or how'd you play? How was the round? And even if it's not about the product, they're just like, hey, these are my people. And I think if you put that off, then they're going to be more. And I'll even have, now that we've had that spirit and working with people, I'll have more and more people reach out, basically, on their own volition, like, hey, just wanted to send you some feedback. We just launched some glow golf balls recently, and some people sent some feedback like, hey, this didn't work, or it was a little bit hard, or the light was out. And I said, thanks for the feedback. I've been hearing it from other people. What else can we build into the next iteration? And if you're just like candid and just and open with people, it really, people really appreciate it, and they're more likely to be okay with, hey, if something didn't work, but these guys and gals are working on it, they're improving, and I'm excited about what the 2.0 and the 3.0 looks like. But don't feel like you need to hide behind an 800 number or an email, hey, blah blah blah.com.
That as you said before, I speak with, brands of all sizes here. And the most successful ones, or at least the ones I consider most successful, they have many things in common. And one of them is that they reach out to their customers. One of them, an mid 8-figure brand, what they do is they have a customer success department,
Mm-hmm.
proactively customers. And they even do this, like, I haven't heard this, but um, they, the classic win back flow, the
Mm-hmm.
email, like, for those who don't know, it's like, we miss you. If you bought a long time ago, they retarget with some we miss you emails, and we all get those, right? But they call them to say we miss you, but not to say just that, to ask feedback. Hey, you've been with us for I don't know how long in the subscription or not, and it's been a while. We would just want to reach out and see what happened. If you didn't like anything or whatever. And of course, over time, have adapted their processes to transition to a sales pitch. If there's a fit, welcome with you for you to come back. Would you be happy with this offer or whatever? Welcome with you for you to make you happy. And they have KPIs of that. They actually get customers from there. So they have like a phone version of the win back flow, literally an 8-figure brand reaching out to the customers. If you earn 6-figure brand, 7-figure brand, 9-figure brand, 10-figure brand, reach out to your customers. You as the CEO to the VIPs for everyone, you want customer success department, whoever, but you cannot live in a world in which you're distant from your customers, because in the end you're building for them.
That's right. And even if you do a bunch of those calls or emails, and even if you get one or two nuggets, maybe you get a nugget or an insight of a product or a service that you're currently thinking about building, maybe that reinforces it. So it can only go up from there. Even if they end up leaving or they want nothing to do with you, you get unlocks that, actually, we were thinking about doing that a year from now on the roadmap. Maybe we bump that up. Maybe this is statistically significant data of other things that are happening or other symptoms. It just doesn't cost anything to do that, really. And it's much better than just trying to trawl the internet or I mean, comments are great and looking at forums on your products, that's a good supplement, but the direct line, nothing can replace that.
I think that separates companies that care from those that don't. And
Mhm.
maybe some companies care, and the founder is shy and they don't want to bother customers, and they truly care. I'll give them that. I've spoken with many of them. I'll say the following, like, again, if you care, if you truly, truly care, talk to them. They won't reach out. As you said, you need to reach out to them. So anyway, Jordan, this was amazing. I wanted to thank you for being here. Went over the time we had scheduled, so I wanted to thank you for that as well. Before you leave, I wanted to ask you, where can people go to learn more about you personally, if you're present on LinkedIn or any other social media, and about, of course, Odin?
You can find Odin at odin-golf.com. You can email me anytime, jordan at odin-golf.com. Always love jamming. If you're into golf, would love to talk about golf stuff, or just business building or jamming or shooting the shit in general, I love doing. And you can find us on Instagram, Odin Golf. We're on TikTok, we're on YouTube, predominantly on Instagram, and just would love to hear from people. And I would say just keep fighting the good fight. Again, building a business is not glamorous at all. I mean, all this stuff we're talking about, there was tons of behind the scenes things that we had to do. And I know everyone listening and watching is going through the same thing. So keep pushing, and again, just take those inventory checks, keep the bigger picture in mind. And if you're building for the long haul, I mean, businesses 8 to 10 plus years, they take a long time. Find your people, find the community that, and that's the other thing too, to one on that flame that we have building when we talk with people and we keep that line open and get feedback from people, that keeps us going amongst many other things. It's not anything else. It's just like, hey, we're talking with the people we're building for. There's nothing more fulfilling than like building something, getting the feedback, and more fruitful as an experience. So do it even for yourselves. Just like you'll get re-energized in more ways than you would know and expect. So we'll leave you with that. And Brian, thank you again for all that you and Flo do for the community and all the incredible work. I'd love to set up another time to jam on Berlin and Europe. We could probably talk for a couple hours, but appreciate you guys and thank you for everything that you do.
Yeah, thank you, Jordan.
This episode was brought to you by BSR Digital. We help DTC brands grow through paid ads and email marketing campaigns. If you'd like us to help your business grow, head on over to bsrdigital.com and schedule a call with us.